She called it mentorship. I called it the best professional relationship I had ever had. We were both telling the truth. We were also both wrong. There is a specific kind of smart that gets you into a room with powerful people. And then there is a completely different kind of smart that keeps you safe once you are there. I had the first kind. I had almost none of the second. I did not find that out until it was too late to matter and just early enough to do something about it. What they don't tell you about being stolen from is how clean it feels at first. How much it looks like opportunity. How the person taking from you is often genuinely generous in all the ways that don't cost them anything. This is that story. The real version. Not the one I told at dinner parties for 2 years. The one where I finally understand what actually happened and what I built with it. The room I thought I had earned. I was 29 years old sitting in a hotel corridor in Atlanta when Valentina Restrepo Garza handed me her card and changed the direction of my life. She had just finished a keynote on brand identity at a conference I had attended on a discount registration code. I was in the 4th row taking notes, not because I thought I would need them later, but because the way she organized ideas was unlike anything I had encountered in 6 years of agency work. She did not present information. She constructed arguments. There was a difference. Most people in that room could not name it. I could. I had been trying to do the same thing for years with a fraction of her resources and none of her platform. After the panel, I made a comment to the moderator about how the framing of one of the questions had undermined the most interesting possible answer. I was not trying to be noticed. I have always done this, said the thing I was thinking when most people say nothing. My mother called it a blessing. My first boss called it a problem. The truth lived somewhere between the two. Valentina was 3 feet away. She heard me. She stopped. She looked at me the way people look at something they have been searching for. Not with warmth exactly, with recognition. Then she said, without waiting for a response, "You were the one who pushed back on the moderator's framing. That was the right call. I need people like you." She handed me a card and walked away. I stood in that corridor holding the card, feeling something I could not name immediately. Not excitement. Something quieter. The feeling of a door opening that you had been knocking on long enough to start wondering if you had the wrong house. 3 months later, I joined Meridian Creative Group as Director of Brand Strategy. The title was the most senior I had ever held. The salary was 60% higher than anything I had made before. And the promise, spoken directly, in a private meeting in Valentina's corner office in Miami with the afternoon light cutting between us, was that I would help shape what Meridian became. That my work would be visible. That I was not filling a role. I was building something. I believed her. I need you to understand that before anything else. I believed her not because I was naive, but because everything she did in that first year was consistent with the promise. She was a difficult boss, demanding, fast, occasionally precise in the way she dismantled your thinking before rebuilding it better. But she was also genuinely generous with credit, with access, with introductions. She brought me into rooms I had never been in. She introduced me to clients as the architect behind our most important work. She answered my calls on weekends. She pushed me harder than anyone had ever pushed me and somehow made the pushing feel like respect. You know that feeling? When someone you admire tells you that you are the only one they can trust, and every single thing they do for the first 12 months confirms it. You start to believe that we are going to change what this firm is capable of. We are building something that lasts. We are the exception. That is what makes it work. When someone takes something from you slowly, piece by piece, over 18 months, they are usually doing something else during that time that is real. The generosity is real. The investment is real. The relationship is real. That is not contradiction. That is the mechanism. The clarity architecture. Before I go further, let me explain something. Because the thing at the center of this story is not dramatic on its surface. It is a methodology. A framework. A set of documents and processes and proprietary language that I built over 6 months of concentrated work. I called it the clarity architecture. 3 phases. Phase 1. The honest inventory, a structured process for mapping the gap between what a company claimed to be and what its customers actually experienced. Phase 2, the reframe engine, a methodology for finding the authentic story underneath the marketing story and building a new narrative around it. Phase 3, the deployment map, a sequenced rollout plan that treated brand change as organizational change, not just a design problem. Simple concept. Not simple to execute. The frameworks were specific, proprietary tools, scoring systems, workshop structures, a client-facing language system that could be taught to account teams. 6 months. Most of it built at my kitchen table on evenings and weekends because the days were full of execution and the frameworks required the kind of sustained thinking that open-plan offices make impossible. Here is why it matters. The clarity architecture was what made Meridian strategic, offering genuinely different from the dozens of boutique consultancies competing for the same clients. Before I arrived, Meridian was good. After I built the methodology, Meridian was irreplaceable. That is not my assessment. It is what clients said, in language so consistent I eventually stopped being surprised by it. Here is the part one need you to understand. I built the framework inside Meridian's infrastructure. I used Meridian's client engagements to test and refine it. I named it with a name that felt like mine. And I never once documented that it was mine in any way that would survive a legal conversation. I did not think I needed to. I was inside the relationship. I was trusted. The work had my name on it internally, in every document, every presentation, every workshop debrief. I thought being seen was the same as being protected. It was not. Before I go further, let me explain something else. There is a psychological trap called the sunk cost of love. In economics, it is why you keep pouring money into a failing business, because you have already lost so much. In a professional relationship, it is why I stayed through the first signs, a meeting I was not invited to, a presentation credited to someone else, a phrase that landed wrong and then disappeared before I could examine it properly. You are not staying because the present is good. You are staying because you have already paid for the ticket, and you cannot admit to yourself that the story is not going in the direction you believed. Modern analogy. It is sitting in a restaurant for 3 hours after the food went cold because you already tipped the waiter. The waiter did not make the food. The food is not getting warmer. The reason this matters here is that Valentina knew what my investment was. She knew my tip was loyalty. She knew I could not easily walk away from the accumulation of 3 years, from the version of myself I had built inside the context of her belief in me. That knowledge was not incidental. It was structural. The pitch that changed everything. Month 14. A major pitch to a luxury hospitality group in New York. 6 weeks of work. The most sophisticated application of the clarity architecture I had built to that point, designed for a client whose brand had become unrecognizable from the inside out. I built the entire presentation, the strategy, the diagnostic framework, the proposed 3-year engagement structure, the language. Valentina presented it alone. I was not invited to the pitch meeting. I found out afterward, the way you find out things in agencies, through a conversation not meant for you, in a corridor, between 2 account directors who did not realize I was close enough to hear. The contract came through 2 weeks later. $1.4 million over 2 years. The largest single engagement in Meridian's history. The internal announcement credited Valentina's vision. My name was not in it. I sat with that for 3 days before I said anything. I want to be honest about those 3 days. I was not calculating. I was grieving something I could not fully name, the feeling of having put the most concentrated version of yourself into something and watched it walk into a room without you. I brought it up on a Thursday afternoon in a closed-door meeting. Professional. Direct. I told Valentina that I needed my contribution to that pitch to be visible, not just internally, but in client-facing contexts, in the positioning, in how the methodology was described. She listened. She nodded. She said that internally everyone knew the work was mine. Then she used the word optics. She said external credit was a different calculus, that her name on the work was what made clients trust it, and that trust was what made my work valuable in the first place. She was not wrong about any of it. She was also not addressing the thing I had actually said. She refilled her coffee. The meeting ended. I walked back to my desk and sat down and thought, something just shifted. I did not know what yet. But something had moved. The Meridian method. I can already see the comment someone is typing right now. She should have had a contract. She should have protected herself from the beginning. You are right. And that is exactly the wrong place to locate the problem. The question is not why I did not protect myself. The question is why protection was necessary. Those are different questions. The first is about my failure. The second is about what was being done to me. Both are true. They do not cancel each other out. In the 4 months after that meeting, a pattern I had not been able to name became visible. The clarity architecture, the name I had given the methodology, the name in every internal document, quietly disappeared. In its place, in client proposals, in marketing materials, in a new section of Meridian's website I had not been involved in building, the Meridian method. A trademark filing. Meridian Creative Group as sole owner. I found out about the filing the way I found out about most things at Meridian by that point, not because anyone told me. Because I was paying attention. I want to be upfront about something. When I started putting this together, I was going to tell it as a story about a villain. A powerful woman who saw something valuable in someone younger and took it. Clean. Comprehensible. The kind of story that feels satisfying because the moral geometry is simple. But at some point on a Wednesday evening, sitting at the same kitchen table where I had built the frameworks, I read one specific thing, a message in an email chain I was not supposed to have access to, forwarded to me accidentally by someone copied on the wrong thread, and the frame shifted entirely. Valentina had been in early conversations with a private equity group. An acquisition. The valuation was tied directly to the firm's proprietary methodology. The methodology was mine. The acquisition would generate, at conservative estimate, between $8 and $12 million for Valentina personally. She was not stealing my work because she was careless or because she lacked appreciation. She was stealing it because it was worth stealing. There is a specific moment where something you suspected becomes something you know. The room does not change. The light does not change. But everything you have been looking at rearranges itself into a shape you cannot unsee. That was mine. I did not go to Valentina. I did not send a confrontational email. I went home, made tea, sat down, and started writing. Stop for a moment. If you have been half listening, I need you to actually stay with this next part. Because this is where the story stops being about Valentina and starts being about something that happens to people who build things inside other people's structures without establishing that what they built belongs to them. This is not just my story. I know that because of the number of messages I received after I first told a version of this publicly from people who build quietly and trust generously and discover, usually too late, that being good at what you do is not the same as owning what you built. What I did not sign. 3 months later, the severance package arrived on a Tuesday morning. Manila envelope. On my desk. Before 9 a.m. Valentina was not in the office. Inside, a letter. A severance agreement. And a non-disclosure agreement that was, in terms of scope, the most comprehensive I had ever seen. It covered the methodology, the frameworks, the client relationships, the work product, the name I had given it, and this is the part that told me everything I needed to know about what they were afraid of. It covered any future professional activity I might engage in that could be construed as derivative of work performed during my employment at Meridian. It was not a severance agreement. It was a purchase. They were buying my silence, my future, and the thing I had built. All for a number that, relative to a $12 million acquisition, was insultingly small. I took the envelope home. I read the NDA 3 times. I placed it in a drawer. I did not sign it. I want to be careful here about what I am and am not saying. I am not saying Valentina was a monster. I am saying she was someone who had always operated this way, who built a firm by absorbing the capabilities of people who trusted her before they understood their own value, and I had simply failed to see it clearly enough, early enough. That is not comfortable to admit. But it is the true thing. The people who build something real are not always the people who understand how to hold on to it. That gap between building and ownership, between visibility and protection, is not an accident. That gap is structural. And there are people who have learned to profit from it. Valentina was one of them. She was also, in the same breath, one of the most skilled people I had ever worked with. Both are true. Neither cancels the other. I do not know where you are watching this. Maybe it is late. Maybe you are supposed to be doing something else right now. But if you have made it this far, I think you already know why the story matters to you specifically. Because either you have been here, or you are here right now, or you are close enough to someone who is that it feels the same. Stay with me. The second part is where everything changes. If the anger you felt reading this is a relief, if something finally got named, hit the like. That is what that button is for. Save this one. Not for nostalgia. For the next time someone in your life tries to use your trust as a loophole, you will want to come back to what comes next. There is a version of this story that ends with this severance package in the drawer and me spending 6 months being quietly devastated. I will tell you the truth. I spent approximately 3 weeks being devastated. Then something shifted. Not inspiration, something colder and more useful than inspiration. Clarity. I had built something real. I had documentation, my own notes, my own drafts, my own version history stretching back to the earliest iterations of the framework. I had client testimonials referencing the methodology in terms specific enough to establish authorship. I had an email record that established a timeline of development predating Meridian's trademark filing. I had, in other words, enough. Not enough to win a lawsuit. Enough to begin. The kitchen table again. I started at the beginning. Same kitchen table. Same late evenings. Except this time I was not building something inside someone else's structure. I was building something that was mine in every legal, documented, time-stamped sense before I did anything else with it. The methodology I rebuilt was not identical to the Clarity architecture. It was better. Because I was 2 years further along. Because I had run the original through dozens of client engagements and knew exactly where the original frameworks were strong and where they were built on assumptions that real-world application had disproven. I had been doing the work. Valentina had been presenting it. The person who does the work always ends up knowing more than the person who presents it. That asymmetry was, in retrospect, the only advantage I had needed. I documented everything this time. Version history. Date stamps. A registered copyright on the core framework document. A provisional patent application on the proprietary scoring system, not because I was certain it would hold, but because the filing date established ownership in a way no internal document could. Then I called 3 clients. Not Meridian clients. Former clients, people I had worked with before Meridian, relationships I had built over 6 years that predated everything. People who knew me. People who understood what I actually did. I told them I was launching independently. I told them I had rebuilt and improved the methodology. I told them I was not interested in pitching, that if they wanted to work together, the terms would be on my paper and under my name, and I would not be presenting anything I was not in the room to defend. All 3 said yes. I did not call that a business. Not yet. I called it a start. The name on the door. I want to tell you about the moment I understood what I was actually building. It was not dramatic. I was not standing in a new office or signing a major contract. I was at a grocery store, the Publix on Biscayne, on a Saturday morning, pushing a cart through the produce section, and I was running through a client problem in my head the way I always do when I am doing something unrelated, and something landed. Wait. The problem I was solving was not a brand problem. It was an organizational trust problem wearing a brand problem's clothes. And I had a framework for that. Not the Clarity architecture. Something newer. Something I had been developing in the space between what the Clarity architecture could do and what it could not. Something I had been calling, in my own notes, the alignment gap, the specific distance between what a company's internal culture believed about itself and what its market actually experienced. I stopped in the middle of the produce section. I got out my phone and typed 3 sentences. Those 3 sentences became the foundation of what I now call the alignment gap framework. The core proprietary methodology of Celestine Strategic, the firm I launched 8 months after leaving Meridian. I named the firm after my grandmother. Celestine had run a catering business for 31 years out of the same kitchen in Charlotte. She had never had a business card that reflected what she actually was: the person responsible for the most reliable, most respected, most consistently excellent food operation in a 3-mile radius, With no marketing budget and no corporate structure, and no one to advocate for her value except the quality of what she produced. I named the firm for her because I wanted to remember what it felt like to build something worth building. And to own it completely. What the acquisition looked like from the outside. The Meridian acquisition closed 7 months after I left. The valuation I had estimated was close. The final number was $11.3 million. I know this because it was reported. Briefly. In a trade publication that covers mid-market agency acquisitions with the same enthusiasm it brings to press releases about office relocations. I read the article once. I will be honest, it made me angry. Not dramatic angry. The quieter, more specific kind you feel when something you knew was going to happen, happens, and the knowing it in advance does not make it sting any less. The Meridian method, trademarked, owned, the centerpiece of the acquisition's value proposition, was described in that article as having been developed by Meridian's leadership team over the course of the firm's evolution. I read that sentence twice. Then I closed the tab. Then I went back to work. Go back to the part where I described sitting at that kitchen table on a Wednesday evening, reading the forwarded email. I told you I was going through a client problem when I was in the produce section. I did not tell you what I had been working on in the 3 weeks between those two moments. I had been reconstructing, from my own records, a complete provenance document for the Clarity architecture, a time-stamped archive establishing every phase of development from initial concept to final methodology. Not for a lawsuit. For something more useful than a lawsuit. For the moment when I would be in a room with someone and they would need to understand, precisely and immediately, that the intelligence behind what they wanted to acquire lived in my head and not in a trademark filing. That document was not revenge. It was architecture. The second thing I built was harder to document, but more valuable. Every client engagement I ran after leaving Meridian, I ran with one explicit condition. I would be credited. By name. In every case study, every reference, every public-facing description of the work. Non-negotiable. I turned down 2 engagements in the first 6 months because the clients wanted to use the work without attaching the name. I walked away from both. That was the thing Valentina had taught me, without meaning to. Not how to take. How to hold. Now, if you are someone who builds, who generates the thinking, who constructs the frameworks, who does the work that makes organizations better, and you have been operating inside a structure that does not have your name on it, this channel is for you. Not for people who want the comfortable version of ambition. For people who are ready to understand the actual mechanics of how value moves and how to make sure it moves in your direction. Subscribe. We go this deep every week. There is someone in your life who is in the room right now. The room I was in. 18 months deep into a relationship they believe in, producing work that belongs to them, trusting that being seen is the same as being protected. Send them this. Not because it will save them from everything. Because the earlier you understand this mechanism, the more of your own work you get to keep. Now that you understand how ownership gets stripped from the people who generate value, you need to understand the specific moment in a professional relationship when the dynamic shifts from investment to extraction. Because that moment has a signature. It is recognizable. And most people miss it. That video is next. The thing I understood too late, and then just in time. This is the part most people never hear. Because it requires saying something uncomfortable about yourself. I gave Valentina the tool she needed to erase me. Not by being naive. Not by trusting too much. By operating inside a structure I did not own and producing work I did not legally anchor to myself and building a professional identity that was legible only in the context of someone else's platform. I had been doing this my entire career. Meridian was just the first place where the stakes were high enough that the cost became visible. The uncomfortable truth, and I have turned this over enough times that I am confident it is true, is that the most dangerous professional situation you can be in is not one where someone is obviously exploiting you. It is one where someone is genuinely investing in you while simultaneously structuring the relationship so that your value flows upward and your ownership flows nowhere. Those two things can happen at the same time. They often do. Here is what I know now that I did not know at 29. The Alinas and the Valentinas of the world are not your competition. They are your high-interest loans. You use their name, their office, their platform, their access to build your skills and your client base and your understanding of how the market actually works. You pay them in labor while they believe they are owning you. But the moment you have learned enough to build the bridge without them, the loan is paid in full. If you stay 1 second longer than it takes to learn the mechanism, you are not a partner. You are a volunteer. Being seen is not ownership. Being credited is not protection. A relationship, even a genuine one, does not replace documentation. And the person in the room with the most power is almost never the person who built the thing. It is the person who controls the structure the thing is built inside. Until you build your own structure. Celestine Strategic closed its first full fiscal year with 7 clients and a revenue figure that was, on a per-engagement basis, more than double what Meridian had charged for equivalent work using my methodology. Not because I am more valuable than Meridian. Because I am not splitting the value with anyone. Valentina got $11.3 million from the sale of a company built substantially on my intellectual property. I got something she did not anticipate. The version of myself that knows exactly what she is worth. And knows how to make sure everyone else knows it too. I almost wish I could tell you this story has a clean ending. The anger is real and it does not fully go away. The loss, not the money, something more specific, the 18 months of genuine belief in a relationship that was never fully what I thought it was, that is a real loss, and I am still making sense of it. What I cannot do anymore is go back to not knowing. Once you understand the alignment gap, the space between what a structure claims to offer and what it actually delivers, you see it everywhere. In the organizations you work inside. In the relationships you build. In the way value moves, quietly, from the people who generate it toward the people who control the infrastructure around it. Knowing this does not make you cynical. It makes you precise. And precision, I have found, is a better foundation for building than trust alone. There is one question I still sit with. Whether Valentina knew, from the beginning, that this was how it would end. Whether the investment, the access, the introductions, the genuine development, was always a long game. A cultivation strategy. Whether she recognized what I was capable of before I fully recognized it myself and made a calculated decision to position herself between my capability and the market before I could do it independently. I do not know. I have tried to find an answer that satisfies me. I cannot. The last thing. The Clarity architecture became the Meridian method. The Meridian method was valued at $11.3 million. That number exists in a filing somewhere with Valentina's name on it. The alignment gap framework belongs to me. It is registered. It is documented. It is the core of a firm I built with my grandmother's name on the door. Valentina did not give me the alignment gap framework. She did. Just not the way she intended. Tell me something in the comments. Have you ever built something, a system, a framework, a way of doing something that no one else in the room was doing, and watched someone else put their name on it? And the harder question, did you stay? Or did you leave? I want to know what you actually did. Not what you should have done. Because I think the gap between those two answers is where the real conversation begins.